Rest, soft mess. Alexandrina Hemsley / One Day 103. Being asked to articulate the concerns of my practice right now, in autumn 2022, amidst both personal and political uncertainties, is a real pleasure. It requires me to pause, reflect, and put time aside in ways that I can struggle to, a moment to pay myself some serious attention. Invitations like this delight me because in order to start to have something to say, I need to reflect upon and update my response to a core question. Why dance? Or why an interdisciplinary practice? Right now, dance, film, writing, collage, facilitation, each hold something in common. Some collective tissue in the form of starting with a body as a container for multi-layered expression. Dance as a way of surfacing our inner worlds. I work with improvisation, I think, because this gives me an immediate and fulfilling tapping into our senses. I use imagination to create quite vivid, image-based worlds to guide the dancing. Similarly, my imagination is activated and these inner worlds are surfaced whenever I write poetry or splice collages together. When teaching and facilitating, I am actively engaged in delicately noticing the inner worlds of other people and how we each encounter one another in the space. Essentially, I'm drawn to creativity as a way to get closer to the environments and climates of our bodies and expand these presences outwards to mingle with, be alongside, or change external societal frameworks. I've always been driven to imagine otherwise, dream up and cultivate ways of existing within a marginalised body, a body who isn't believed, who some would prefer didn't exist, somehow always a difficult body, a disturbing body, a bullied body, and reassure myself that while I may want to escape these circumstances, I don't want to escape my body, or maybe escape these oppressive environments constructively rather than disappear. And so I make other worlds, on the page, on the stage, or the screen, as ways of exhibiting agency, a place, a right to exist, a right to be multiple also in sense of self, sense of space, sense of time. Within Ashok's invitation was a moment or impulse to, and I quote, take a break from thinking about marginalisation in our practice and instead focus on our creative work, end quote. I don't think I can separate these things out because my creative work is made within marginalising situations. But it's interesting to consider where my attention is usually placed. Am I more often in the harshness of the marginalisation, racism and ableism, and their purposeful operations which erase, eradicate, minimise, dismiss, cause self-doubt and add to exhaustion? Or am I more invested in carving out my own space to seek and tap into the ways creative work can nourish and replenish? And if I'm not allowing myself to be replenished, how might I be able to more? Can I take a break? And again, can I separate out how taking a break feels or think through it fully while also knowing that my body, including my mental health, have consistently demanded that I take breaks? Can I consider something or build upon something that I don't always have agency over? Will, when or how I rest always have an element of tension or internal conflict within it because rest isn't immediately replenishing and isn't always pain-free? Also, as a freelancer, rest costs me money. Needing to rest means I miss out, drop out, let others down, let go. I'm reminded of when I last took a significant amount of time off to rest and how I had to remind myself, that looking back, that it was a mental and physical health necessity and not a holiday. It didn't even really feel like time off, just time doing other things. It was actually sitting with painful things that I could ignore or suppress with the adrenaline of work. It was a work of soothing my body's physical pain and grieving. It wasn't very restful. When was I last resting rather than trying to rest? I'm not working, but am I resting? This isn't a holiday, it is survival. And now I'm putting this text together on bed rest and feel so icily vulnerable. Rest is messy, rest is mess, or being with the mess. Cleanse, 2018, after Nahira Waheed. Mouth clenched, I press a toe into clear waters. I flinch a little at the ritual's heat. I am pressing past the fire of taking too many tears to bed and seeking a vessel to surrender in, a bath. Trapped in the moment of loss, I let the hot tap run its pain. I am torn at you leaving. Cracks need washing out of my skin so that a poem can rise up in place of the war you conjured and fled from. The steam returns myself to me. Reading Ashok and Joe's emails back around this invitation, I'm struck by the many instances where they both offer support. Conversation, filming help, chances to discuss what I might say if I had the time. There was consideration too of whether I prefer to work alone. Not only is their generosity rare, but my own noticing that I glanced over this. I brushed it aside and excluded their offerings as something I could take either of them up on. I had to face up quite ashamedly to the fact that my current circumstances mean that I'm actually too tired to know what my preferences are. And that I default so effortlessly into the, oh no, I'll be fine, I'll work alone, I'll come up with something to say in the quiet hours of the morning, the early hours of the morning when the moon is still up and I don't think for a second that I might deserve support. It's kind of a protective mechanism to contain my messy head, keep all my uncertainties hidden. That way I can resurface and fulfill the invitation with coherency. Currently, I'm sitting restlessly at the edges of myself where rest is a survival and somehow I've assumed that means going it alone. Plus cat. We are in the terrain of the compounding and contradictory isolation of resting. Right now, I need to rest. My life depends on it. Burnout in 2014 to 2015 meant adapting practice and finding ways to explore around mental health and disability. These tidal, radical shifts in how to navigate an arts practice, which I can still be quite resistant to. I still have a want to keep up with the norm, and foregrounding rest within my practice currently also means missing out on a lot. With a lot of rest comes a lot of internalized judgment for me about not being able to keep up, be present, or witness and support work by friends and peers that I admire. Within rest, there's a constant learning for me to be soft, soft, soft. Last year, my stillborn son passed through me to rest always, from womb world to an unknown world, having never stepped foot in this one. My body as container, a tomb, a sanctuary. I laid my son to rest. Do I just text Ashok and Joe and say the themes of rest are resounding too much? The volume that these connections are taking up is too great? Or do I sit compassionately with myself and consider the volume's container and shape? Because again, I want to build, to construct rather than disappear. The container of rest is fragile but beautiful, weak but important. I've been filmmaking as part of my practice since 2015, as another kind of container and another kind of intimacy. A gentler way of making work than performing on stage because it didn't continually demand a live presence. I could both ease up on the demands of a performance schedule and find ease. Within my latest work, Fountain, I wanted to continue to develop the watery writings and metaphors I'd used in my creative writing for many years. I wanted to make real and make felt how I draw upon water as a way of feeling held, from having a bath, having a swim, and also the ways that I turn to water as whenever I feel overwhelmed, emotionally flooded or navigating uncertainty, feeling swept along. Fountain blends dance with digital watery environments, and I love how creating digital landscapes is a way to extend imagination and again realise or make real the environments that hold our bodies and their experiences, our psychogeographies, ranges of emotions that can be transposed onto a surrounding landscape, and our bodies are held and reflected within them. There is a meeting point, like when skin meets skin, an encounter, an acknowledgement. There is also grief and loss in the work, intrinsically linked to the histories of water within African and Caribbean people and the African and Caribbean diaspora. The colonial carving up of rivers. How invested in oppression do white supremacists have to have been to devise ways of bending water, drawing these straight borderlines up against all that pre-colonial flow? Alongside these wider legacies and collective grief, partway through the creative process for Fountain, I experienced the stillbirth of my son, and so rather than be in making and performing the work pregnant and access the tides of water that I was holding then, I was overcome with grief. I wonder if accessing a sense of ease could come from gratitude. I'm very grateful that Fountain has had a picture house tour. It's been wonderful to see the scale of the work, the feeling in the cinema with dancing on such a big screen. Audience members have been small and intimate. I think a mixture of me being unable to continually have a presence the last few years, I guess, and also this huge, urgent, wider economic context of what so many are facing this winter. Very few of the industry folk I've built up connections with over the past 12 years have come to see the work. I'm not sure where this leaves me and my career, especially in relation to disability, exposure, access, inconsistency of support. But for those organisations who have been to see the work and supported the ways the tour has had to adapt around my need to rest, I've been incredibly touched by the flexibility shown and how this work can and is being presented even while I rest at home. I'm really proud, and I really hope that it sets a precedent for other artists and dance filmmakers to move in these spaces if they want to. There is always the dimension of navigating more mainstream spaces and the tensions and power disparities around this. Could accessing rest, comfort and ease come from permission? This summer I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't care for my long mixed heritage hair and I cut it off. In the past, shaving my head had always felt empowering, something I felt a lot of agency in. I used it as a kind of passageway or transition marker, a kind of closing of the chapter and inviting in the new, inviting in the future. To friends and colleagues, I span my latest chop as part of the same cycle, like, oh yeah, I do this every few years. But I was lying, I was sick, I was too sick to cope, and too exhausted to condition and comb through my hair. I was too proud to ask for help. I chopped off a part of me instead. My relationship to needing rest, the resistance I can feel, can be brutal. As my curls grow back out, I wonder what could have happened if I gave myself permission to be cared for, be seen as vulnerable, incoherent, lost. Right now, there is a disconcerting amount of comfort and coherency, reporting after the facts. The moon has gone to bed, and now the sun is up. Upcoming for 2023. Limited edition collage printed on bedding, duvets, blankets and pillow covers. Launching Oscar Rock Bereavement Fund, including care packages for freelancers who have experienced baby loss. Watch this space. Rest, soft mess. Alexandrina Hemsley /Yewande103. www.yewande103.com. Social media handle @Yewande103.